I've always been the kind of person who enjoys being alone. Not in a sad or antisocial way. I just like the quiet. That's why I was so excited when I finally landed a remote job and rented a small place tucked in the woods of Oregon. A little outside of Eugene. It wasn't fancy. Two bedrooms, creaky floors, and a porch that sounded like it was gasping with every step, but it was mine. And when the rain came, and it always came, I'd brew some coffee, open a book, and enjoy the sound of it hitting the roof. That's what I was doing the night it started. It was October, just before Halloween, and the rain had been steady all day. A heavy, soaking kind of rain. I had my laptop open on the couch, half watching a documentary, when I heard something at the back door. A soft tap. I muted the video and waited. Nothing. Then again tap. Tap. Tap not hard enough to be knocking. More like fingernails. I stood up slowly and walked toward the kitchen, which had a clear view of the glass door leading out back. It was dark outside, except for the light from my kitchen bleeding into the yard. No one was there. But my backyard, backed up to thick woods, and there was no fence. If someone wanted to walk right up to my porch, nothing was stopping them. I stood at the door for another minute before shrugging it off. Probably a branch. Or maybe a raccoon. I sat back down. 15 minutes later, it happened again. This time, it was louder, like a scraping sound. I walked back to the kitchen and turned on the back porch light. The bulb flickered for a second before settling into a weak yellow glow. That's when I saw it, a handprint on the outside of the glass. Not fresh, it looked smudged. Like someone had pressed their palm and dragged it slightly downward. I stood, frozen, eyes darting between the woods and the faint reflection of myself in the glass. There was no movement, no sound except the rain. I told myself it could have been there from earlier, maybe even days ago. I hadn't really looked, but something in my gut tightened. I locked the door and drew the curtain across it. That night I went to bed earlier than usual, feeling uneasy. I double-checked the locks on every window and door before crawling under the covers. I kept the hallway light on. That's something I normally do, but it gave me a weird sense of comfort. Sometime around 2:30 a.m., I woke up to what sounded like wet footsteps. I live alone. At first, I thought it was the house settling. Rain can do weird things to old wood, but these steps were deliberate, like bare feet slapping gently against the floor. They were coming from the living room. I held my breath. I wanted to believe I was dreaming, that it was just some auditory illusion from the storm outside. But the sound was too real, too close. I sat up and reached under my bed for the aluminum bat I kept there. I'd never had to use it before. I didn't even play baseball. It was just something I brought with me when I moved out, just in case. I crept toward the bedroom door and opened it slowly. The hinges whining. Silence. No more footsteps. I stood in the hallway and peeked around the corner. The living room was empty. Nothing looked out of place. Then I noticed the back door curtain. It was open. Just slightly, like someone had pulled it back to peek inside. I know for a fact I had closed it earlier. I stood frozen for at least a full minute. Then I walked over, bat in hand, and yanked the curtain open fully. Nobody. But the sliding door now had two more. HANDPRIN test. One on each side of the glass. Pressed at face level, like someone had stood there. Watching. The next day I called the local sheriff's office. I didn't report a break-in because technically there wasn't one. Nothing stolen. No entry. But I explained what happened and asked if they could patrol the area or at least log the incident. The deputy who came out was friendly but clearly skeptical. "You live alone out here?" he asked, scribbling on his pad. "Yeah. Sometimes people get spooked when they're isolated for a while. Rain, woods, shadows, it plays tricks." I didn't argue, but I did buy a security camera that same afternoon. One of those double Wi-Fi enabled ones you can check from your phone. I installed it just above the back porch, angled down to capture the door and surrounding yard. For a few days, nothing happened. No strange sounds. No handprints. I started to think maybe the cop was right. Maybe I just let my imagination run wild. But then On the fifth night after installing the camera, it rained again, harder than before. Thunder cracked in the distance in the wind, howled through the trees. I was working on a project late, sitting in the kitchen with my laptop when I got the alert. Motion detected. Back porch. I clicked the notification. Heart thumping. The footage loaded grainy night vision view of the porch. For a second, nothing moved. Then a man stepped into frame. He was barefoot, soaked, wearing what looked like a torn flannel shirt. He walked right up to the glass, leaned forward, and rested his forehead against it. He stayed there, breathing. I could see the condensation building up. He didn't knock. Didn't speak. Just stood there, his head pressed to the glass, his hands slowly dragging down. I stared at the screen, unable to move. Then he turned toward the camera. He looked straight at it. Straight at me, like he knew I was watching. I called 911 immediately. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me while officers were dispatched. I didn't dare move. I sat in the dark, watching the feed, watching this man stand in the rain like a statue. He didn't flinch. He didn't leave. When the police finally arrived, sirens off, flashlights cutting through the night, the man was gone. No footprints. No signs of forced entry. But the camera caught it all. I showed them the footage. The lead officer, a tall guy with a thick mustache, replayed the clip several times, pausing on the man's face. Do you know him? No, I said. Never seen him before. He nodded slowly. We'll canvass the area. If he comes back, don't hesitate to call. They left a cruiser parked down the road for the night. I didn't sleep. Over the next week, I got 3. More alerts, always on rainy nights, always between 2 and 3 a.m. He never did anything more than stand there. Sometimes he smiled. Sometimes he whispered something I couldn't hear. Once, he placed something on my doormat. A Polaroid dot. It showed the back of my house. Taken from the tree-lined dot in the photo, I was sitting at the kitchen table. The lights were on. He had taken it that night. I moved out within 2 weeks. Broke my lease. Paid the penalty. I didn't care. The landlord didn't argue. When I showed him the footage, he just turned pale and muttered something about, not again. I don't know what that meant. I didn't ask. I live in a small apartment. Now, lots of neighbors. Secure building. No woods. Sometimes, when it rains, I still check the back door, even though there isn't one anymore. I live in northern Louisiana, out in a place where the trees outnumber the people 100 to 1. I've always liked the quiet. Not the kind of quiet you find in a library or a church, but that alive kind of quiet that only happens when it rains deep in the woods. I work nights. I'm a maintenance tech at a chicken processing plant. Glamorous. I know. The shifts are long, the smell's horrific, and the drive home is a pitch black stretch of highway with more raccoons than streetlights. I was heading home one night after a 12-hour shift. It was close to 2 a.m. and the rain was coming down in thick sheets. The kind of rain that makes your wipers practically useless. I always take the same route home, a 2-lane state. Highway that winds through swamps and pine forest. There's a stretch about 6 miles from my house where the road dips low and curves around a swampy embankment. That's where I saw her. She was standing at the edge of the road, soaked through, arms wrapped around herself like she was freezing. My first reaction was confusion. This wasn't a place anyone should be walking, especially not at this hour, and especially not in that weather. She looked young, maybe mid-20s. No umbrella, no coat. Just jeans and a soaked white hoodie that clung to her like a second skin. I slowed down and pulled over, rolling my window down a few inches. You all right? I called out over the rain. She nodded quickly, stepped closer to the car. My car broke down a few miles back. My phone's dead. Her voice was soft, almost swallowed by the storm. I hesitated. Something about the way she stood, too stiff, too composed, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. But I didn't want to be the kind of guy who leaves a woman stranded in the middle of nowhere. Where are you headed? Just up the road, the old Anderson place. I frowned. The Anderson place was an abandoned farm about 4 miles away. No one had lived there in years. You got family there? I asked Dot. She blinked slowly. Yeah, my uncle. It didn't feel right. Still, I unlocked the door. Hop in, I'll drive you. She climbed in slowly, shivering. I turned the heat up and got back on the road. For a few minutes, we drove in silence. The rain hammered the windshield. I kept glancing at her from the corner of my eye. She hadn't moved at all. You sure you're all right? I asked Dot. She nodded, staring straight ahead. Never seen anyone out here this late. I added, trying to keep my tone light. I don't like being out here either, she said. But it's safer than the ditch. I looked at her. What ditch? She didn't answer. I glanced at the rear view. Nothing behind us but wet darkness. A minute later, she asked, Why'd you stop? I looked at her, confused. What do? You mean? Most people don't stop for someone like me. Her voice was flat. I tried to laugh it off. Well, I'm not most people. She turned her head to me, and for the first time, I saw her face clearly. There was something wrong with it, not grotesque, just off. Dot. Her skin looked pale, like porcelain that had been left in a freezer. Her eyes were huge and dark, no light in them, and her lips, even though she was clearly freezing, were parted just enough to look like she'd been smiling for too long. Dot too wide. Too empty. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Where'd you say your uncle lives? I asked, trying to push. Through the tension, she didn't respond. I looked over. She wasn't in the seat. She was gone. The passenger door was still shut. Dot. The seat was wet from where she'd been. I slammed the brakes. My truck skidded on the soaked pavement, fishtailed, and came to a shuddering stop on the shoulder. My heart was racing. I looked around oddly. Open highway. No lights, nothing. Then I saw her again, standing in the middle of the road out 20. Feet ahead. Got her head tilted slightly. Arms still wrapped around herself, like she had never been in my truck at all. I didn't move. I didn't drive forward. I just stared at Dot. She started walking toward me. Dot slow, unhurried. I threw the truck into reverse and backed away, tires slipping on the wet pavement. She didn't run. She just kept walking, and then she was gone again. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my porch with a flashlight in my lap and a shotgun at my feet. The rain stopped around dawn. I called in sick and didn't leave the house all day. That night, it rained again, around 2:30 a.m. I heard a knock at the front door. 3 soft taps. I didn't move. Then I heard it again, but not at the front door. At the back. Then the side window. Tap. 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 Like someone walking the perimeter, checking every entry point. I called the sheriff's office, barely keeping my voice steady. By the time they arrived, it was quiet. They found wet footprints around the house, barefoot, small dot leading to the ditch beside my driveway. A few days later, I talked to an old guy who'd lived in the area forever. I told him what I saw most of it anyway. I didn't want to sound crazy. He got real quiet, said about 15 years ago. A young woman had crashed her car in that same bend in the road. Rainy night. Lost control. She wasn't found until the next morning. She crawled out of the car and tried to get help, but ended up falling into the roadside. Ditch. Drowned. Face down in water, less than a foot deep. The coroner said she could have survived if she hadn't been knocked out. People say she walks that road on rainy nights, trying to find someone who will stop. But if you do ... she follows you. I don't take that road anymore. Hell, I moved 2 towns over. But sometimes, when the rain hits hard against my windows, I wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding. Blankets damp with sweat, because I swear I heard tapping. Just 3 soft knocks. Somewhere near the ground. Like someone's still out there, lying in a ditch, waiting for me to stop again. I used to live in a rental house just outside Worcester, Massachusetts. It was a standard 2-bedroom Cape-style home in a quiet, older neighborhood where every other house had overgrown hedges and cracked driveways. I moved in during the fall of 2020 during peak COVID chaos. I'd just broken up with my girlfriend. got a remote job doing digital marketing, and figured a little peace and quiet in the suburbs might help me reset. The house was dated but clean. The landlord had redone the hardwood and painted most of the interior. The only thing I really didn't like was the basement dot. It was one of those low ceiling, unfinished types with a sump pump in the corner and exposed piping overhead. But I didn't have to go down there much, just when I did laundry or reset the breaker. If a storm knocked the power, the weirdness didn't start until it rained. It was early November. I remember that because I'd just bought one of those ugly flannel coats to survive the colder days. It rained hard that night. The kind of wind-whipped, window-pelting storm that makes you grateful you're not stuck outside. I was playing a game on my PC when I heard a voice. It was faint. At first. I thought it was coming from my headphones. Maybe some ambient sound in the game. But when I paused it, the voice kept going, muffled, coming from below. I stood up and muted everything. The voice kept going, soft, drawn out, almost like someone calling for help. I walked slowly toward the basement door. The voice stopped. I stood at the top step, listening. Just the hum of the fridge and the rattle of the old radiator. I flipped on the basement light and started down. The smell hit me first. Not sewage exactly, but something wet and old. Like damp newspapers and mildew. There was nothing there. The pump. In the corner gurgled as usual, water draining beneath it. I checked every corner, every pipe. No leaks. I told myself I was being paranoid and went back upstairs. But the voice came again. 2 nights later. And this time, it was saying my name. I didn't want to believe it. Nobody else knew I lived there except my boss, my ex, and my landlord, and none of them would be creeping around in a flooded basement whispering my name at 2 a.m. I opened the basement door again. But this time, I didn't go down. I just stood there, watching. Nothing. Then I heard it again, just a breathy whisper. Eric. I slammed the door shut and pushed a chair in front of it like some cartoon idiot. I didn't sleep much that night. I asked the landlord the next morning if there had been any issues with the previous tenant. He hesitated. Said the guy before me had left in a hurry. No forwarding address. No complaint. Just packed up in the middle of the night and never came back. When I asked if he mentioned why, the landlord said he claimed the sump pump made noises. I wanted to ask more, but he got cagey. I left it alone. The next time it rained, I recorded it. Set up my phone on a tripod and pointed it toward the sump pump overnight. In the morning, I watched the footage. Nothing for the first 2 hours. Just the usual drip and hum. Then, just after 3:15 a.m., a faint voice let me in. It wasn't just a whisper. It sounded like someone, not something down there. Wet. Choking on the words. I felt cold watching it. Like the temperature had dropped just from hearing it. And then the most disturbing part, just a flicker of movement in the corner. Barely visible. Something crawling behind the pipes. I sent the clip to a friend of mine who works in audio design. He ran it through some filters, isolated the voice. He said it was real. Not a loop, not feedback, not distortion. He also said something else. There's more than one voice. I played it again with headphones. This time I heard it 2 voices. Overlapping. One whispering Eric. The other laughing. Not loudly, not gleefully. Just a faint chuckle, like someone who knew a secret and found it amusing. I stopped going in the basement entirely. I started doing laundry at the laundromat. Then I started sleeping with headphones. But the voices didn't stop. They got closer. One night, during another storm, I woke up to the sound of water dripping inside my bedroom. I turned on the lamp. There was a small puddle near the closet. No pipe overhead. No leak I could see. Just water and muddy footprints leading from the wall to the foot of my bed. I moved out the next morning. Didn't even wait for daylight. I packed a bag, threw my essentials in the trunk, and left. My landlord didn't even act surprised. He didn't ask for a cleaning fee. He didn't ask for a forwarding address. Just said, some houses don't like to be empty. You probably woke it up. I didn't respond. I live in an apartment building now. No basement. No sump pump. No storms to worry about, but last week, It rained again, Dot, and when I stepped into my bathroom at 3 a.m., I noticed something strange, Dot. My shower drain was bubbling, not clogged. Not overflowing, got just gurgling, like something alive was shifting underneath. And when I leaned in to listen, I swear I heard it. Eric, still down there? Still waiting.